I stayed late to finish a report when I heard voices in the conference room. She knows too much. Terminate her Friday and lock her out immediately. They laughed about my shocked face. I didn't react. I went back to my desk and made one small change. By Thursday afternoon, the air conditioning sputtered to silence at 8:17 p.m. I wiped sweat from my forehead, grateful for the quiet after a 14-hour workday. My fingers continued tapping code improvements to the network security protocols. A thankless job no one understood, but everyone depended on. Then the voices drifted through the thin wall of the executive conference room. I hadn't realized anyone else was still here. She noticed the pattern again, said a voice I recognized as Ryland, our CFO. Third time she's flagged those pension fund movements, getting too close to the actual destination. I froze, fingers hovering above my keyboard. Martina built this entire infrastructure, replied Chairman Lennox, his distinctive baritone unmistakable. But she doesn't need to know what's in the basement, so to speak. My name in their mouths made my skin crawl. Agreed, Ryland said. Terminate her Friday. Effective. Immediately, my stomach contracted into a tight knot. 6 years of my life. 6 years building their digital empire from nothing. Can you imagine her face when we tell her? That was Wyatt, the HR director. That panicked expression she always gets when she's cornered. Remember how she looked at the budget meeting when we shot down her raise request? Absolutely priceless. Their laughter slithered through the wall. Blood rushed to my face, hot and pulsing. She actually believed she'd get compensated fairly, Lennox added between chuckles. As if building our entire digital infrastructure warrants more than entry-level compensation. She should be grateful we gave her the opportunity, said Ryland. Women in tech are a dime a dozen these days. More laughter. Make sure it is ready to lock her out instantly. Lennox continued. I want her credentials revoked before her ass leaves that chair. She's too smart to leave any access. What about the systems? Ryland asked. Who will maintain them? You, that consultant, what's his name? Braxton. He's been shadowing her work. Says he can handle it for triple her salary. Worth every penny if it means we sleep better at night. My hands began to shake. I bit my lower lip until I tasted copper. 6 years watching them take credit for my innovations while systemically denying my advancement. 6 years building something that had grown too valuable, too essential, while remaining too female, too ethnic, too difficult to be properly compensated. What they didn't understand about the elegant system connecting their 16 global offices. It relied on a proprietary authentication protocol. I designed from scratch every 60 hours. It required my unique key signature or would revert to its baseline state. A safeguard I'd implemented after they blamed me for their last accounting adjustment that wiped out 3 days of global transactions. A protective measure they'd mocked as hysterical and excessive. A measure that had saved their entire operation twice already. I closed my laptop silently, gathering my things as their conversation shifted to golf scores and vacation homes. These men had no idea what they'd just done. No idea at all. Wednesday morning brought unusual attention. Owen, the chief technology officer, hovered near my workspace as I methodically reviewed code. Making progress on that security update. The board suddenly wants a status report on your server work, he said, eyes scanning my screen. Almost complete. I lied. Fingers perfectly steady despite my racing heart. His gaze crawled over my monitor. We should discuss knowledge transfer soon. You're too integral to our operations to have everything in your head. Happy to document whatever you need, I said with a practiced smile. That evening, I returned to an empty building. I didn't sabotage anything. That would be too obvious, too traceable. Instead, I created something elegant. A transparent bridge that would activate once my authentication key went inactive for exactly 47 hours. Not destruction, but revelation. A pathway that would direct their executive communications straight into governmental oversight channels. Thursday morning, the suspicions grew. During lunch, Asher, the IT director, appeared beside my desk without warning. Pulling long hours lately, he observed. Everything running smoothly, rock solid, I answered, watching him study my face for reactions. The access patterns seem unusual. Data routing pathways have shifted since Monday, my pulse quickened. Had he noticed? Performance tuning, I explained calmly. reducing latency between departments, technical enough to sound legitimate, vague enough to mean nothing. He nodded slowly. Just make sure any changes are approved. I can do that. That afternoon, 3 unfamiliar tech specialists arrived. They circled my workspace like vultures, whispering with executives. I verified my countdown sequence was undetectable, buried beneath legitimate security protocols. Friday morning, Lennox himself stopped by. Unprecedented in all my years. Heard you've been putting in extra hours, he said, leaning against my desk with forced casualness. Dedication like yours deserves recognition. Just doing my job, I replied, meeting his artificial smile with my own. At 4:15, I watched the executive team assemble. At 4:28, I quietly activated an irreversible sequence timer. At 4:30, I entered the boardroom. When summoned, Wyatt began the termination with practice anonymity. Due to organizational restructuring, we must make immediate staff reductions. I remained silent, denying them the satisfaction of my distress. Your system credentials, Owen demanded, thrusting a form across the table. Now I surrendered my primary password, but forgot to include the authentication key that maintained their precious partitioning. Any questions? Lennox asked, visibly unsettled by my composure. Just one, I replied. When did you realize I was the only one who truly understood how your systems worked? Their smug expressions faltered. Security walked me out as I counted hours in my head. Not 24, not 36, but exactly 47 hours until my absence triggered the protocol. Before we continue further with what happened next, thank you for staying with me through this journey. My name is Martina Ellis. I'm 34 years old with degrees in computer engineering and network security. I grew up as the only girl in a house with 4 brothers, which taught me 2 critical lessons: how to stand my ground and how to hide my tracks. Both skills served me well throughout my career in male-dominated tech spaces. 6 years ago, I joined what was then a struggling financial services firm. Their digital infrastructure was a disaster. Outdated systems cobbled together through 3 hasty acquisitions, security vulnerabilities throughout, and integration problems causing weekly outages. I rebuilt everything from scratch, working nights and weekends, while the executives took long lunches and longer vacations. The system I designed became the company's most valuable asset, a proprietary integration platform that seamlessly connected global offices while providing real-time financial tracking that competitors couldn't match. Client acquisition tripled, revenue quadrupled. The executive team received massive bonuses and bought vacation homes. I received a modest performance review, a 2% raise, and a company mug. When I approached Lennox about advancement opportunities, he explained that I lacked executive presence and suggested I smile more in meetings. When I proposed a technical advancement track, Ryland explained budget constraints while wearing his new Patek Philippe watch. Then came the pension fund irregularities while updating security protocols. I noticed unusual transaction patterns, large sums moving through a series of accounts before disappearing off our tracking systems. I flagged it once, and Ryland explained it as standard financial management. I flagged it twice, and Owen suggested I focus on my assigned tasks. The third time I documented the pattern more thoroughly, and now I knew where that had got me. Saturday passed peacefully as I hiked mountain trails, letting nature wash away the corporate toxicity. Sunday morning, I turned my phone back on to find 10 missed calls, 15 urgent texts, and 3 increasingly desperate voice messages from the executive team. Their final voicemail came from Lennox himself. Martina, whatever's happening with the systems, we can make it right. Name your price. Call me immediately. Too late. The 47-hour window would close at 3:15 p.m. morning would bring their reckoning. I hadn't leaked data. I hadn't planted false information. I'd simply removed the artificial barriers I'd built, allowing their own words, their own schemes, their own manipulations to flow directly into regulatory oversight systems. By Monday's opening bell, 8 executives would face federal questioning about the $220 million in diverted pension funds they'd hidden. By noon, trading would halt as their internal messages detailing exactly how they'd falsified financial statements flowed directly to the SEC. The system wasn't broken. It was finally working exactly as justice demanded. At 2:30 p.m. Sunday, Ryland appeared at my apartment door, something I never thought possible. "How did you find me?" I asked, not inviting him in. "Please," he said in desperation, replacing his usual arrogance. "The systems are behaving strangely. Authentication failures, weird routing patterns. Braxton can't figure it out." I leaned against the doorframe. "That's unfortunate. We'll double your salary, triple it. Just come in and fix whatever's happening." Outside, dark clouds gathered, matching my mood. "You fired me, remember? With security, escort, and everything." A misunderstanding, he insisted, sweat beading on his forehead. Lennox spoke hastily. "We need you." For a moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. "It's too late," I said simply. His face darkened. "What did you do to our systems?" "Nothing they weren't designed to do." Ryland's expression shifted from desperate to threatening. "You don't understand what you're messing with. This goes higher than you know." "I understand perfectly," I replied. "I designed every byte of that system." "Listen carefully," he said, lowering his voice. "There are people invested in our operation who don't appreciate disruptions. People who can make someone like you disappear without questions." The implied threat hung between us. I felt a chill despite the summer heat. "Are you threatening me, Ryland?" I asked quietly. He straightened his expensive jacket. "I'm giving you one chance to save yourself. Come in now, fix whatever you've done, and we can pretend this never happened." "I'd need access to all systems," I said, watching his reaction carefully. Relief flooded his face. "Absolutely. Full admin rights." "Whatever you need," I pretended to consider his offer. "I'll need time to get ready." "No time," he snapped. "Cars waiting downstairs." I grabbed my bag deliberately, leaving my laptop behind. As we rode the elevator down, Ryland made 3 calls, telling each person that I was cooperating. The black SUV waiting outside had tinted windows and a driver who never turned to look at us. "The board's assembled," Ryland said as we drove. "Everyone's waiting on a Sunday afternoon." I'm flattered. He didn't respond, just tapped frantically on his phone. When we arrived at the gleaming office tower, Braxton met us at the elevator. A man I'd only glimpsed briefly shadowing my work the past month. Tall, conventionally handsome, with the unearned confidence of mediocre men everywhere. "Thank God," he said when he saw me. "The routing tables are rewriting themselves. Authentication protocols are failing. Everything's going haywire." I merely nodded. "Show me." The executive boardroom had transformed into crisis headquarters. Laptops covered the polished table, cables snaking everywhere. Lennox paced while barking into his phone. Owen hovered over 3 IT specialists who looked close to tears. Everyone fell silent when I entered. "Martina," Lennox said, relief evident in his voice. "Thank you for coming. Whatever's happening, we'll make it right." I checked my watch. 37 p.m. 8 minutes until the authentication key required renewal, a deadline they didn't know existed. "Let me see what's happening," I said, sliding into a chair. They gave me access to a workstation. I typed commands slowly, watching system diagnostics, while the executives hovered behind me. The protocols were exactly as I designed, counting down to the moment when the barriers would dissolve. "Well," Owen demanded after 3 minutes of silence. "What's wrong with it?" "Nothing's wrong," I said calmly. "The system is behaving exactly as designed." "Then why is everything failing?" Braxton asked, peering at my screen. "It's not failing. It's resetting to its natural state." Lennox pushed forward. "What does that mean?" "Speak plainly." I checked my watch again. 3:12 p.m. It means in about 3 minutes all internal communications from the executive level will begin routing externally as well as internally. The room went silent. "What communications?" Ryland asked in his voice suddenly. "All of them. Every email, message, and voice transcript from the executive suite for the past 6 months." I stood up from the computer, including discussions about pension fund diversion. Lennox's face was drained of color. "You can't." "I already did." I cut him off. "The authentication protocol requires my key signature every 60 hours. I shortened it to 47 after termination, knowing you wouldn't discover the discrepancy in time." "Stop it," Owen commanded. "Now I can't," I said truthfully. "It's irreversible once initiated. Even if I wanted to help, which I don't." Braxton pushed me aside and began typing frantically. "There must be an override." "There isn't." I said, I designed it that way after you blamed me for your last accounting adjustment. Ryland grabbed my arm. Listen to me. Fix this and we'll give you anything. Board position, name your salary. I pulled away from his grip. You should have thought of that before you decided I was disposable. 3:14 p.m. The executives began shouting over each other. Pull the servers offline. We can't shut down global operations. Call legal. Destroy the hard drives. I walked toward the door, but 2 security guards blocked my exit. You're not going anywhere, Lennox said, voice quivering with rage. Not until you stop this. That's kidnapping, I pointed out calmly. It's national security, he countered. What you're doing is terrorism, I laughed. Actually, I laughed. Exposing your financial crimes isn't terrorism. It's whistleblowing. 3:15 p.m. My phone vibrated in my pocket. The countdown had reached 0. Alarms began blaring from multiple computers. Red warnings flashed across screens. Braxton cursed loudly. What's happening? Lennox demanded. Authentication failure. Braxton read from his screen. Protocols reverting to baseline. Partition walls dissolving. English, Ryland shouted. I answered him. It means your secrets aren't secret anymore. The next 4 hours were chaotic. IT specialists cycled through increasingly desperate measures, while executives pulled me into interrogation after interrogation. None of it mattered. The system now operated as originally designed without the artificial barriers I'd created to protect their compartmentalized information. By 7:00 p.m., the first regulatory flags had appeared. Automated systems at financial oversight agencies detected unusual data patterns. The very pension fund movements I'd flagged 3 times. At 8:00 p.m., Lennox received a call that drained the remaining color from his face. The SEC has questions about our pension management. He told the room after hanging up. They've received concerning information. All eyes turned to me. I told you, I said calmly. I didn't leak anything. Your own communications did that night. They kept me in the building against my will. 2 security guards outside the glass-walled conference room where I sat for hours. They brought in lawyers who alternated between threatening federal charges and offering millions in hush money. None of it mattered. The system continued its methodical exposure of 6 months of executive communications. Past midnight, Lennox entered alone, looking decades older than he had the morning before. You don't understand what you've done, he said, slumping into a chair across from me. I understand perfectly. There are people involved in this who won't just accept exposure. Dangerous people. Then you shouldn't have involved them in pension fraud, I replied. He rubbed his face. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. We needed liquidity during the pandemic. The plan was to replace the funds once markets stabilized. Tell that to the retirees who depend on those pensions. We were protecting jobs. You were protecting bonuses. I corrected it. I saw the compensation packages approved the same week you diverted the first 40 million. His expression darkened. You think you're clever, a hero exposing corruption, but you're just a vindictive woman who couldn't handle rejection. I leaned forward. Rejection. You stole my work for years, took credit for my innovations, paid me a fraction of my worth, then planned to discard me because I noticed your crimes. This isn't about rejection. It's about justice. They'll come for you too, he warned. You built these systems. You're complicit. No, I shook my head. I have dated time-stamped reports flagging these issues 3 separate times, reports you ignored or suppressed. I'm protected under whistleblower statutes. Around 2:00 a.m., they finally let me leave, realizing holding me would only add kidnapping to their growing legal problems. I slept dreamlessly that night, exhausted, but at peace for the first time in years. Monday morning arrived with breaking news. Trading had been halted on the company's stock pending regulatory investigation. By noon, federal agents swarmed the office building. By evening, 8 executives, including Lennox and Ryland, had been escorted from the premises for questioning. I watched it unfold from my apartment, fielding calls from regulatory agencies who wanted my testimony. Each call confirmed what I already knew. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. The executives' own words, preserved in their messages to each other, provided all the proof needed. Tuesday brought unexpected visitors, representatives from the pension fund's beneficiaries, thousands of employees and retirees whose futures had nearly been stolen. "They're calling you a hero," said Jenny, a retiree who'd worked 30 years at the company before Lennox took over. "You saved our livelihoods. I hadn't expected this." The human faces of those I'd protected without realizing. It hit me harder than anything else, seeing gratitude in the eyes of people who'd nearly lost everything. Wednesday morning, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Martina Ellis," a deep voice asked when I answered. "Speaking, my name is Director Hollister, Federal Financial Crimes Task Force. We need to talk about your former employer." My heart raced. Was I in trouble after all? "I'm listening," I said cautiously. "Not on the phone," he replied. "A car will pick you up in 30 minutes. Bring any supporting documentation you have." The black government vehicle arrived precisely on time. The agents inside were professional but tight-lipped, driving me to a nondescript federal building downtown. Director Hollister was a stern-faced woman in her 50s with calculating eyes that seemed to see right through me. "Miss Ellis," she said once we were seated in a conference room, "you've uncovered one of the largest pension fraud schemes we've seen in a decade. But we need to understand exactly how you did it." For the next 3 hours, I walked them through the system architecture, the authentication protocols, and how the partitioning had been designed. I explained each safeguard and how, when removed, the executive's communications naturally flowed into regulatory oversight channels. "So you didn't technically leak anything?" She clarified. "You simply removed artificial barriers that were hiding information." "Correct." The system reverted to its natural state. She studied me for a long moment. "Clever, almost too clever. Which raises questions about your own culpability." My mouth went dry. I flagged the irregularities 3 times. "So you've said, but we only have your word for that." Had I miscalculated? Was I about to become the scapegoat after all? Director Hollister slid a folder across the table. "Open it." Inside were printouts of my 3 flagged reports complete with timestamps and recipient acknowledgements. "Where did you get these?" I asked, stunned. "Your authentication protocol reset didn't just expose their communications. It also restored access to suppressed internal reports, including these reports that executives deliberately buried." She almost smiled. "You've been more thoroughly vindicated than you realized." Relief flooded through me. "What happens now?" "Now," she said, closing the folder, "we'd like to offer you a job." I blinked at Director Hollister, unsure if I'd heard her correctly. A job. The Financial Crimes Task Force needs people who understand how these systems work from the inside. People who can recognize patterns others miss. She leaned forward. "People with your particular skill set and moral compass." "I'm not law enforcement," I said cautiously. "No, you're something more valuable. A systems architect who understands both the technical and human vulnerabilities in financial networks." She slid a business card across the table. "Think about it. We offer competitive compensation and the satisfaction of stopping people like Lennox before they can do real damage." I pocketed the card, mind spinning with possibilities I hadn't considered. As I left the federal building, my phone buzzed with a notification. Breaking news. The company's stock had plummeted 68% since trading resumed. The pension fund story had broken wide open, with financial networks running special reports on one of the largest attempted pension thefts in corporate history. That evening, my doorbell rang. A courier handed me a certified letter, a preliminary lawsuit naming me as a defendant alongside the executives. The company's board was scrambling to distance themselves, attempting to frame me as a disgruntled employee who had participated in the scheme. My stomach dropped. Had I underestimated how far they would go to protect themselves? I called Director Hollister immediately. "We expected this," she said calmly. "Standard corporate defense strategy. Spread the blame as widely as possible." "Don't worry, Miss Ellis. The evidence speaks for itself, but legal battles could drag on for years." I said, panic rising in my throat. "I can't afford it." "Check your email," she interrupted. "The Whistleblower Protection Office has already filed counter motions. You'll also find contact information for 3 attorneys who specialize in these cases. They're expecting your call." True to her word, my inbox contained everything she'd promised. One email stood out. A message from the Justice Department confirming my protected status as a whistleblower, effectively shielding me from corporate retaliation. Over the next 2 weeks, the situation evolved with dizzying speed. Lennox, Ryland, Owen, and 3 other executives were arrested on multiple charges, including wire fraud, pension theft, and obstruction of justice. The company announced a comprehensive reorganization, as its stock continued to plummet. Meanwhile, I received an unexpected offer from the pension fund's trustee board, a consulting position to rebuild the company's systems with proper oversight and transparency. The salary was triple what I'd made before. "We need someone who understands both the technical landscape and the ethical imperatives," explained Trustee Daniels during our meeting. "Someone the employees and retirees trust." I considered both offers carefully. The federal position offered the chance to catch other corporate criminals. The trustee position meant rebuilding something broken into something better. 3 weeks after that fateful Friday termination, I sat in a cafe across from my former workplace, watching employees enter through the revolving doors. Many faces looked uncertain, worried about their futures now that the leadership had imploded. My phone rang. Jenny, the retiree who thanked me. "Have you seen the news?" she asked without preamble. I hadn't. She directed me to a financial news site where the headline made my coffee go cold. "Former CFO found dead in apparent suicide as pension fraud investigation widens." Ryland. I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Shock, sadness, but not guilt. His choices had led to his end, not mine. "There's more," Jenny continued. "They've discovered offshore accounts. The money trail leads to 3 other companies with the same leadership structure. This wasn't isolated. It was systematic. The investigation had expanded beyond anything I'd imagined. My simple act of removing digital barriers had uncovered an entire network of corporate theft spanning multiple companies and countries. That afternoon, I received another unexpected call from Braxton, the consultant who'd been shadowing my work. "Can we meet?" he asked, voice tense. "There are things you should know." We arranged to meet at a public park. Braxton looked terrible, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, constantly glancing over his shoulder. "I didn't know," he began without greeting the pension funds. "I swear, Martina, they told me I was being brought in for standard succession planning." "Why are you telling me this?" He swallowed hard. "Because last night, 2 men came to my apartment asking questions about you, about what you might have seen beyond the pension accounts." A chill ran through me. "What men?" "They didn't introduce themselves," he said bitterly. "But they knew things, details about the system architecture that weren't public. They were professional, scary professional." "What did you tell them?" "That I knew nothing." "Which is the truth?" He leaned closer. "Martina, this isn't just about corporate fraud anymore. The government contracts overseas connections. I think you've stumbled onto something much bigger." I contacted Director Hollister immediately after leaving Braxton. She arranged protective surveillance without hesitation. "A precaution, not a cause for alarm," she assured me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Had I truly understood what I was exposing, or had I simply pulled one thread of a much larger tapestry? The next morning brought clarity in the form of a front-page newspaper story. "Financial fraud investigation uncovers links to international money laundering operations." The article detailed how my whistleblowing had inadvertently exposed connections between the pension fraud and a sophisticated global network moving billions through shell companies. Senior government officials in 2 countries had already resigned. Financial regulators worldwide were launching coordinated investigations. 1 month after my termination, I testified before a congressional committee investigating corporate pension fraud. Cameras flashed as I described discovering the irregularities and being fired for my persistence. The committee chair called me a profile in corporate courage. The media narrative transformed me from terminated employee to folk hero. The system architect who brought down a criminal enterprise. Interview requests flooded in. A major publisher offered a book deal. A prominent university asked me to give their commencement address. I declined most offers, uncomfortable with the spotlight. But I did accept Director Hollister's job offer with one condition. I would work as an independent consultant, maintaining my freedom to choose my projects and speak publicly about corporate accountability. 6 months later, I stood in a federal courtroom watching Lennox and the remaining executives enter their guilty plea. Their expensive suits had been replaced with subdued business attire, their arrogance with defeated expressions. When Lennox glanced up and saw me watching, Something flashed in his eyes. Recognition that his downfall had come not from a grand conspiracy or sophisticated sting operation, but from a woman he'd underestimated. A woman he'd laughed about firing while planning to steal from thousands of innocent people. The judge's sentencing was unsparing. 15 years for Lennox, slightly less for the others. Financial restitution in the millions. The complete dismantling of their personal wealth. The court views these crimes with particular severity, the judge stated. The defendants torment positions of extraordinary trust to enrich themselves at the expense of working people who spent decades building this company. As Lennox was led away in handcuffs, he stopped briefly beside me. "You've destroyed everything," he said, voice barely audible. I met his gaze steadily. "No, you did that yourself. I just removed the barriers that hid it." That evening, I visited the company's headquarters. My first time returning since being escorted out. The building looked the same, but everything inside had changed. New leadership, new protocols, new transparency measures that ensured no one could ever again divert funds without multiple levels of oversight. The system I had built now served its true purpose, protecting the financial security of thousands rather than the criminal activities of a few. My revenge wasn't in destroying something, but in restoring it to what it should have been all along. In my new office at the Financial Crimes Task Force, I kept a single memento from my previous job, the company mug they'd given me instead of a proper raise. Inside it, I placed the business card of the federal prosecutor who had thanked me for my courage. Not everyone gets to see justice served so completely in their lifetime. Not everyone who stands up against corruption lives to witness its unraveling. But that day in the courtroom, watching those who had dismissed me face the consequences of their actions, I realized the most powerful revenge isn't destruction, it's restoration. Setting things right, creating systems where truth can't be buried and exploitation can't be hidden. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or pushed aside by those who thought their power made them untouchable, I hope my story gives you strength. Sometimes justice requires simply removing the artificial barriers that hide the truth.